The story begins with the narration explaining how God created humanity and witches. God bestowed powers to the witches with the purpose of helping and guiding humans who didn't possess magical abilities. The witches gladly agreed and promised to help humans in the name of friendship. However, in the present day things have taken a drastic turn. Humans have turned against witches and want them banished as the witches prepare to be publicly executed. One of the witches curses the humans for their betrayal and she hopes humanity perishes before she's hanged. Meanwhile, in the Redia Empire in the Salsavian region, in the middle of the desert, a young boy named Adonis complains about being tired after traveling for a long time. He's an apprentice to an ice witch named Chloe, who is rigorously studying a map to determine the next route they should take. Adonis takes a jibe at her and asks why she can't use magic to determine the location. Chloe dismisses him, reminding him her magic is not free. As she goes back to reading the map, Adonis takes out his smartphone which tells them their precise location. Much to Chloe's chagrin, she insists he refrain from using it or they'll be found, but Adonis explains that he made the smartphone himself so it can't be used to track them. Because it uses free summoning magic, it is quite cost-effective. Its latest technology can easily keep them safe from the army's radar. Adonis could have stopped here, but he decides to push Chloe's buttons by calling her methods lame, which doesn't go in his favor and he ends up with a double bump on his head as a result of the smack. Suddenly Adonis' face turns somber and he asks Chloe why they have to be on a run. Chloe understands his frustration and explains that she is a witch, and after the change in the people's attitude towards witches, living has become a struggle. She tries to cheer Adonis and they soon resume their journey. It is imperative for them to find a place that is tolerant towards witches so they can reclaim living in peace, which once was the norm. Seeing Adonis adamant about studying under her, she pulls his leg and asks if he is into older women, making Adonis embarrassed and mad at her. Chloe giggles and Adonis wonders how she can be happy in a horrific place like Redia, where the witches are subjected to atrocities. Adonis is hatred towards the region as such that he believes they should eradicate humans with magic. Just then something glistening at a distance catches their attention. A number of army men and high-speed vehicles approach them. It soon becomes clear they are there to eliminate Chloe, whom they regard as a fugitive, which Adonis takes a defensive stance, but Chloe stops him as he is inexperienced with using magic and steps forward. She activates her ice magic fully, which procures her a staff which she uses to subdue the army men. Adonis, however, is not at all happy, and after Chloe's done, he angrily asks why she wouldn't let him use magic. Chloe explains he is inexperienced, but Adonis produces a humongous sword to show that he is competent. Chloe lets it slide, but Adonis confronts her and asks if he's being a human is the reason she stops him from using magic, since she doesn't want Adonis to eliminate his kind. Adonis is brought to tears as he shares how frustrated he is because he is unable to protect Chloe. Moved by his words, Chloe embraces Adonis. Meanwhile, the news about the failure to eliminate the fugitive which reaches the 23rd Emperor of the Redia Empire, Gerda. He gets urged and orders the army to bring him Chloe. Unbeknownst to the duo, one of the machines that Chloe froze activates and after confirming their location creates a portal to teleport them to the capital palace. Chloe and Adonis start floating and before they're transported they clasp each other's hands. At the capital palace, Gerda addresses the citizens of the region and provokes his audience against the witches. Chloe is shocked that the witches were able to complete the physical transfer over such a long distance and within such a short period. Adonis comforts Chloe and reassures her, and we get to know her name is Chloe. We see a space station hovering in space confirming the extra-dimensional transfer of QS to the capital Central Plaza. The Central Capital Plaza comes into view with the Emperor addressing his subjects modestly. He continued by telling them how witches and magicians have protected them from everything, every natural disaster or physical occurrence that could bring them harm, and his gratitude for their service. His tone then becomes serious and he expresses how unjust it is that he and his subjects have to worship these witches, all because they possess magic which is alien to human knowledge. Then he reveals his grand fleet of airships and hot air balloons which protected the airways of the entire metropolis from any form of attack. They have huge automatic trains which traverse the entirety of the metropolis, and a tool of absolute power and wisdom, the smartphone. He is genuinely pleased with the revolution they have undergone by viewing technology into their everyday life, what he called the gear technology, and the fact that they do not need to rely on witches for their safety, protection, and development anymore. The Emperor then declares war on every witch and sorcerer to prove that they are the supreme leaders of the world and not the witches. The Emperor stepped off the podium as his partner was commending him for his well-spoken speech. The green flash appeared from the skies and struck the ground just below the podium where the Emperor was giving his speech. It was a wide circular area and we saw Adonis and Chloe hunched over right where the green flashed just a few moments before. The Emperor calls Chloe by name, apparently expecting her to make an arrival. While the Emperor looks thrilled, Chloe and Adonis don't look too pleased to be in his presence. Adonis beckons on Chloe to run while he buys her some time. He brings out a quill, but he's quickly overwhelmed by the Emperor's officers. He struggles to get out of their grip, but to no avail. At this point we find out Agnes is her apprentice and he is actually human while Chloe is a witch. Chloe rises to her feet and addresses the Emperor as the king of humans, threatening him to let go of her apprentice if she values the lives of his human audience. At this point we see some mana essence gathering up around here and a huge blue energy ball appears at the top of her staff just behind her. Chloe confesses that she has let the humans live so far just out of pity, but now she was about to destroy all that they love and care about. As she charges up her attack and launched it, suddenly the blue energy ball broke up and decomposed. Shocked and wide-eyed, Chloe looks on in disbelief. The Emperor addresses her, telling her how foolish she was to underestimate the power of technology they have acquired, and a magic photon nullifier comes into view. The audience are really pleased with the nullification of Chloe's magic, laughing and jeering at her. Adonis also tries out his magic as he is held down, but it was also nullified, so nothing happens. The Emperor walks up to Chloe, grabs her garment and rips it to pieces. He then lands a resounding slap which sends her tumbling to the ground, telling her witch you can't use magic as a mere woman. Then the audience took this opportunity to take some pictures of the infamous witch while making rude remarks at her. Adonis manages to break free from the grip of the Emperor's guards, but he is brought down by the guards again before he can reach her. The Emperor orders his guards to kill Adonis, and at this point Chloe bows her head to him. She pleads for her apprentice to be left out of her humiliation, claiming he is innocent since he is human. She claims she took him as a slave against his own will. She kept begging for his life to be spared while profusely shedding tears. Adonis tried his magic again, vowing to kill all humans present, but the Emperor, not paying him any mind, raised a gun to Chloe's head. She pushed her head to the muzzle, accepting her fate, Adonis now shedding tears as well, wondering why fate dealt them such a bad hand. Chloe addresses him and tells him thank you for everything. There's a flashback to when she picked him up as a small starving child on the streets. Chloe approached him, she offered to help him get up and he accepted. Suddenly he snaps out of his recollection at the sound of the lady being shot in her head by a man wearing a white suit. The Emperor turns back to leave and his soldiers go all out, shooting Chloe with their guns. Adonis, too much shocked to speak, gathered as a crowd watching and filming this. In a rage, he yells at them to stop. He begins to remember all the times they were together and how truly happy he was. He watches her fall onto the ground as cries his eyes out. The crowd cheers out to the man, and why does he stands in front of them feeling glorious. His guard walks toward Chloe and chops off her head using an axe. The Emperor picks up her head and raises it to the crowd as they cheer while Adonis cries profusely. 10 years later, in a prison camp in the Redia Empire, children are chained up. Two girls fight over food and the girl named Daroka tries talking them out by offering them a loaf of bread. But one of the girls just snatches it from her, asking her to stay away from their dispute. Just then a girl named Anna walks up to her to find out if she's okay and why she gave her food. Daroka just avoids the question, playfully telling her that she okay. They sit together and Anna tells Daroka about how generous she is. She begins to cry, saddened by the fact that they were told if all witches were dead in the world would be a better place, but they still fight themselves even after all the technology was invented. Daroka cheers her up with some puppet show, telling her they'll be fine no matter what, and they both eagle sadly. Just then some guards come and yelling a prisoner's number and asking him to get up, but no one responds. In fear, the girls whispered this was the 4th time someone had been called and taken and wasn't returned back to the holding units. They both stared at the guard in fright, wondering who had been called upon. Just then Daroka looks at their tag to find out that it was Anna being called. She quickly exchanges their tag, takes Anna's number and responds to the guard. He asks her to follow him. Meanwhile, Anna stares at them as they both walk away with tears gushing from her eyes, and shocked Daroka is sacrificing herself for her. She fears the outcome, knowing fully well that Daroka will not be returning. Daroka is standing between two guards being interrogated by Chief Warden Palpol. He asked her to take off her clothes to confirm there was no infliction on her. He was about to give her to the Lord as a service girl. She shocked at his request, but looks around to see the bodies of other girls and sadly accepts her fate. The warden goes on ramping up how his place is run by the taxes of people, so he has to serve them well. He grabs Daroka, forcefully taking a photo of her with him while he's on his phone about sending the photo to HR. She bites his finger and grabs the phone from him. Palpol screams out loud, telling the guard to go after Daroka as she runs away from the room. While running, Daroka tries to unlock every cell, releasing everyone, but realizes that it requires voice recognition to carry out the task. She tries multiple times in frustration but is still unable to unlock the cells. She then begins to imitate the chief warden and to her surprise successfully unlocks the cells. She screams at the girls to run as the gates open. There's a commotion as the cells open and the prisoners begin running. The guards are unable to control the situation, so they call for backup. Daroka runs towards giant golden doors and taps the phone to unlock it. The door opens, revealing a room with a steel containment. As she stares at the containment, some guards catch her, hitting her to the ground. They are trying to control the situation by preventing the doors of the containment from opening, but it is too late as the door opens. We then see a man covered in bandages releasing himself from several chains. He is Adonis, who's been confined for the past 10 years and now wants revenge. Things continue. The guards tremble in fear and Adonis, with unparalleled anger, breaks free from his shackles with fear. In his voice, one of the guards points out that prisoner 1001 is free and he wants to report it to the chief. There is no time though, so they make the incredibly wrong decision to try and put him back in the chamber. These hopeless fools think it will help if they all going at once, but Adonis instantly eliminates one of them. Without a single word or wasted movement, Adonis expertly finishes off the other two, Daroka probably wishing she still had her puppets. It's terrified out of her mind and Adonis begins to approach her. She begs Adonis not to do anything, but her measurable anger courses through him and it's as if words can't reach him. He fires a shot at her, but we see that he's somehow able to still be merciful, as he only shattered chains. An announcement is made to all the guards in the prison warning that all cell doors and corridor partitions have been opened. Elsewhere, Director Yamato, whose your lives could probably be seen from space, tells the blonde guy to handle the situation at the prison and gives them permission to arm himself with weapons greater than Class 5. This guy speaks far too casually for Vice Director Yuki's liking and is sent on his way. Yuki promises to kill that blonde boy eventually, but your model warns against it as he is a high-ranking executive just like her. Director Pancake, for your lobes, is confident in the guy's abilities but knows that the prison is quite dangerous. At the prison, the chaos continues and it is reported to the warden that even the confiscated item storage has been open. He can't believe that the Daroka managed to crack his phone's voice authentication system and is deeply frustrated by her choice to free the one person they couldn't afford to let escape. Elsewhere, we see Adonis atop a building. He tests his powers by firing a bullet and uses one of his written style summoning spells called Gain. Adonis, clearly with only one goal in mind, it claims that it's now time to end every last citizen. Back at the prison, blonde boy, whose real name is Ikao, reports that he has searched the entire internment camp but found no signs of the boy. We see that taking care of the situation actually meant eliminating all the prisoners, and he learns that a building was struck by a massive shell. He will head there as soon as possible but decides that he needs to clean up the cause of the mess first. Back in the city, Daroka is completely distraught. She blames herself for the catastrophe that's to come since she couldn't stop Adonis. Nearby, Adonis roams the city and we see that his destructive behavior has made the news. It reports that a massive artillery show-like object was fired into a building. The extent of the damage is unclear, but it could be an attack by neighboring nations. Adonis continues to roam as he thinks about how Chloe would not praise him for what he's about to do. He imagines what she would say, emphasizing that getting revenge won't bring her back to life. He managed to escape, so she would want him to just go enjoy his life, but Adonis is able to find just a tiny bit of comfort from these words. But some belligerent jerks, who probably deserve what's coming to them, call them a creep when they see him talking to himself. Adonis acknowledges that 10 years have passed since Chol's death, but no matter how much time passes, he will never forget what happened. The look in her eyes, her voice, the words when she told him she loved him. He states that he loved her too. Just as he starts using his written style summoning magic, there is shakes beneath the city, and this time Adonis has summoned the giant. Nearby, the police don't believe callers that are calling about a giant, but they quickly realize that something is wrong when a car comes crashing into their building. The driver is terrified of something huge, but the cops, doing what they do best, don't believe him either. And this brilliant detective that probably deserves a raise determined that the driver's just drugged out of his mind and they should just arrest him. Sherlock calls the narcotics division but quickly realizes his mistake when he actually sees the giant. The giant is doing immense damage to the city, leaving people in peril. Adonis that makes his way to the center of the city as he exclaims the Emperor Gerda better not try to run. By the Emperor, Yamato's informed that the giant robot, it's passing through the business district and heading their way. They're unable to stop it and all attempts to reach the Emperor have failed, but the Queen has informed them that he is not well. Director Yamato declares a state of emergency. He requests air-ground support from all available aircrafts in order that all armored foot soldiers be sent as well. Yamato marvels at the giant robot and is informed that the boy and his quill have gone missing from the prison, making it clear that the giant must be powered by magic. This makes things much simpler for the pair of earlobes with the body attached to them, as this means they only need to activate their magic photon suppression device, with the extermination of all which the device was put in underground storage, and it's uncertain if the 10-year-old device will work properly. Yamato leaves the issue of national importance in the hands of Yuki, and with that, the national state of emergency is declared. The giant continues its rampage, and we see that Adonis's rage spares no lives. Some tanks arrive hoping to end the catastrophe, but their attacks miss badly. For some unknown reason their shells won't fly straight. Adonis calls them scum as he makes a demand for their lives and has a giant punch a building with such sheer force that his beat destroys the tanks. Yuki can clearly tell from the massive destruction that Adonis's 10 years in confinement were spent meaningfully. It turned out to be a simulation in its mind without limits, scientific research conducted within the mind, the ultimate environment to determine the most precise way to slaughter a nation. As Adonis continues his rampage, Yuki explains that the only way for a non-witch to use magic is through written-style summoning magic. It is the practice of understanding and systematizing the mechanisms of magic and converting them into mathematical expressions using a special quill. However, mastering it wouldn't have been easy without such an excellent teacher. Right now for Adonis there's no difference between those who were present 10 years ago and those who weren't. Adonis is relentless in his attack. He states that if killing Chloe was humanity's great purpose, then everyone who lives in the country and reaps the benefits is just as guilty. Adonis then demonstrates his incredible power to summon anything at will and summons some giant Gatling guns called the Bullet Belt. Our revenge-seeking protagonist is determined to make things right as he wants to exchange an eye for an eye. He does just as the humans did to his teacher and sprays bullets down on a large crowd. The young man that we saw 10 years ago has clearly been driven to the absolute edge with tear-filled eyes and without any semblance of sanity left. He looks to the sky, finding a bone-chilling beauty and the aftermath of his rampage. However, something isn't quite right. Clearly disappointed and still distraught, Adonis wishes he could feel better about things. Nearby we said that Ekaut is watching, and he is told that the spellcaster is in the palm of the giant's hand. All forces are told that their target is long-term prisoner the witch's apprentice Adonis. The assault on the giant starts with a group of fighter jets. They bombard the giant with several missiles, forcing Adonis off of it. With reckless abandon, missiles continue to rain down, putting civilians at great risk. A building is about to turn a very recently orphaned child into a pancake, but Doroka appears out of nowhere to save him. She leaves the kid with a stranger and explains that she is on her way to stop Adonis. On top of a nearby building, Adonis determines that he's out of shape and soldiers begins to descend on him. Back at the Imperial Castle, we see that Emperor Gerda managed to maintain his impeccable mustache. He was not able to maintain his health. He is severely ill, so the queen tells him not to worry about anything and their empire will be just fine. She tells him to rest and assures that he did a great job as emperor in making sure the empire would be strong. The Emperor of Simpering credits the queen for staying by his side and giving him the strength to do what he does. However, he coughs with enough intensity that it could probably dislodge all his internal organs, and we learn that he has an incurable disease. This absolute alpha male with a mountain of testosterone tells him that he needs no doctor since he is totally fine. Even though he's casually holding a palm full of his own blood, Gerda begins to wonder if his illness is accursed from God himself. It doesn't matter though, he refuses to repent. They built a hyper-scientific civilization and burned their neighbors the witches for the sake of progress. The world and humanity could never advance as long as witches were around. As he gives his little self-assuring speech, we see that Adonis doesn't need any words and continues reducing the population. Gerda continues to explain that humanity must carve its own path alone. The new age has no need for magic, and if anything, magic would only get in its way. There is one thing he is certain of, and that is that he did the right thing. It begins to rain, and Gerda shows that his mustache isn't only smoothing about him, as he tells his queen that she is a flower that blossomed on the path of carnage. Elsewhere, Yamato shocked to hear with his ears that their elite unit has been wiped out. However, what's even more startling is that a civilian is now approaching the target. We then watch as Adonis chokes out a soldier, and the soldier, seemingly with a death wish, tells Adonis that they should have ended his life 10 years ago along with that witch. Adonis, so some of the coldest eyes will ever see, agrees that they should have ended him, and even he wishes they had. Before Adonis can take out more of his frustrations, Doroka arrives to stop him. She begs that he stop his rampage as he has already taken the lives of many citizens of this empire. She wonders if he hasn't done enough yet and explains that she doesn't want to see any more innocent people die. The word innocent absolutely sets him off, and he shockingly ends the soldier's life right in front of her. Doroka has made a huge mistake as they're trying to tell him that these people are innocent has made him realize something. He was confused but has now determined that whether they're radiant or not, all humans are his enemy's subjects for extermination even if they're prisoners. Doroka shows no fear though and tells them that Chloe wouldn't want this. She foolishly pushes her luck but continuing to remind him about Chloe. But this just makes Adonis even more furious, and he reminds the human scum to not casually speak Cole's name. He assumes that Daroka just started to distract him until the next wave of soldiers arrives. It's exactly the type of things humans would do, since they always fight dirty just like they did back then. He is certain that there's no way the witches would have lost to humans if they hadn't used cheap tricks. He tells Daroka to stay out of it since she knows nothing. However, Daroka knows far more than he thought. She states that his name is Adonis. It was the name the world's greatest witch gave to her beloved student. She then shocks him to his core as she states that this is common knowledge for witches like herself. Adonis is in absolute disbelief. For just a moment she begins to introduce herself, but Adonis becomes enraged again. He is certain that she's just messing with his head, and he points out that all witches are dead. He tells the human scum to never speak of witches again, but she explains that they managed to survive the witch hunts. With the whirlwind of emotions, Adonis asked with frustration that if they survived, why they didn't come to save Chloe. Why did they let their fellow witch die? She apologizes over and over again and explains that they were all desperate to escape. Adonis doesn't want to hear any apologies, though it reminds her that it's too late, Chloe's already gone. Daroka then leaves him in disbelief as she states that Chloe will come back. They will bring her back to life. Adonis only takes this as an insult though, and prepares to end her life for her absurd lies. She pleads to him and explains that she infiltrated the country to save him in order to bring back Chloe. They need his memories of her. They need him to resurrect Chloe. Adonis doesn't even seem to be listening to her anymore as he summons a sword. He continues asserting that he will end everyone. He will end her and anyone that gets in his way. He will end anyone who defies him and everyone who speaks of Chloe. Daroka decides that if that's what Adonis needs, then she will gladly give her life to satisfy him. She says that she's just glad to have met him, and Adonis reminded of when Chloe said those exact words. Adonis collapses to the ground, breaking down in tears. His relentless pursuit of revenge pauses for a moment, overshadowed by the faintest glimmer of hope to bring back Chloe. Adonis isn't sure what to believe anymore, but is certain that he desperately wants Chloe back and asks Daroka if it's really possible. She assures him that it is. Daroka instructs him to come with her and promises that he isn't alone anymore. Adonis, changing his focus from vengeance to a desperate grasp at hope, reaches out to her, only to be utterly stunned when Daroka gets shot. It's eked out and he's just disappointed he couldn't hit both of them. Things continue. We then get a look into the recent past as the city is being invaded. Daroka is there and she could only watch helplessly as her home is being destroyed. Her neighbors are being ended right before her eyes, but surprised to see that Mia is still alive. Mia has no clue what happened and explains that the humans just attacked suddenly. Daroka can't make sense out of it as she points out that they were getting along solo with the humans until recently. Daroka wants to go full Hogwarts and magic everything back to normal, but Mia says that they can't and points out that the humans have brought a machine that suppresses their magic. Mia tells Daroka to run and tell someone named Ophelia what is happening as she might be able to help. Daroka wants Mia to come with her, but doesn't seem to realize that Mia has a giant hole in her back that looks like the Grand Canyon and she probably won't be able to stand up, let alone go on a trip. Mia tells her how to get to Ophelia's house, and we finally get to see the origin story of the Great Knight puppet she had in prison. Mia won't let the gaping hole in her back stop her from making one last performance, and she uses a puppet to tell Daroka that she is a strong girl. This absolute show woman hides the pain from her back cave, deepens her voice, and tells Daroka to run as quickly as she can. No one will be able to catch her, and she will be there before she knows it. Daroka takes the puppet and begins running as Mia says her final goodbye. She knows not to look back as she runs as fast as she can, and soldiers find Mia to finish off what they started. Back to the present, Adonis by Daroka's side after she had just been shot. He begs her not to die just yet and desperately asks her how he can bring Chloe back from the dead. She tells him something about the witches we can hear, but he has to move away quickly as bullets rain down on her. Surrounded by soldiers, Adonis' rage can never seem to end as he feels like he's being messed with. He was just given hope that Chloe could be brought back, but has no clue how to do it. The soldiers prepared and Adonis's life, and the foolish Ecout, who stupidly shot the girl that was going to help Adonis, tells Yamato prematurely that Adonis is dead. However, we see that Adonis has picked up his quill and he tells the humans not to get cocky. The soldiers then just watch as Adonis prepares his attack, and only after a few seconds do they decide to shoot. These guys fire every bullet they have, but it's no use as they just bounce right off of Adonis's magic barrier. Yamato can hear the fight from a mile away and doesn't like what's happening. Once Adonis is done demonstrating his power, he turns the bullets against the soldiers and ends them. Adonis doesn't even break a sweat as he ends the entire group, only leaving one bald-headed dude. I guess Ecout didn't just watch what happened as he decides that it would be smart to shoot at Adonis. Other than making a big scene, the bullet does nothing, and Ecout is shocked to see that Adonis easily stopped it. Adonis uses his written style summoning magic on the already pretty big bullet. It makes it way bigger. Only now does Ecalt realize that it was a bad idea, but it's too late as Adonis demands that he died and he sends the giant bullet back. Shooting Daroka in front of Adonis was bad enough, but shooting in Adonis proved to be worse. As Ecalt now to spare legs, Adonis calls all the humans powerless insects and mocks them for thinking that they had any chance of beating him. Adonis speaks to the poor soul he left alive as he wonders if the humans really thought that he would let them live in peace after killing Chloe. Everyone watches from Earlobe headquarters as Adonis states that he will wipe every last one of the humans off the face of the planet. He vows to make them feel Chloe's despair, Yamato completely powerless at this point and just hopes that Yuki can carry out her mission in time. We then watch as Yuki is in awe of the crown jewel of science that once defeated the witches. Once activated, they will be able to suppress Adonis's magic. We then learn that Yamato is actually her big brother. Luckily for her, those cartoonish earlobes don't seem to run in the family, but she does hope to activating the machine will make her useful to her brother. Yuki rushes for men to get things started, but they are stopped by one of the 4 national bureaus of the Redia Empire, the National Science Agency. Director Theta states that she knew the Habitat Security Bureau would show up and acknowledges how much Yuki has grown. Yuki is shocked to see Theta there, and we see that when Yuki lacks an earlobe she makes up for with giant eyebrows. Theta won't allow them to activate the device and Yuki demands an explanation. Back at headquarters, Yamato lifts his phone all the way around his giant earlobe to receive a call from Yuki, but is shocked to hear that it's actually Theta. Yamato tells her that he has no time to speak as they are in a race against time, but he listens as what she has to say is of vital importance. She explains that the magic photon thingamajig cannot be activated. Science is the work of humanity that sheds light on the world. They have learned a lot, but there are still things that they don't understand. One of those things are the particles emitted by the device. She reminds him of the illness developed by soldiers who participated in the witch hunts 10 years ago called human cellular dysfunction disease. They can't say for certain, but they believe these particles affected the human body and this device kills cells. Yamato has never heard this before, but Theta explains that that's because they hid it. Unfortunately for the stupid humans, there are no more witches left to restore the natural environment. The atmosphere that would have cleansed these harmful rays is gone and nature has fallen out of grace. As things are now, if a human body were exposed to a massive amount of particles it would be destroyed. Yamato is more shocked than ever as he now realizes that it might have been the cause of Emperor Gerda's illness. A quick look back at the fight shows that Adonis is laughing maniacally as he easily stops more bullets from more soldiers, and the same thing happens to them. They are quickly losing the battle and Yamato realizes this. Theta tells Yuki to return to the capital, but she takes off running for the device instead. She thinks about how they can't afford to worry about illnesses when the threat of magic is right before them and remembers how her big brother left his task in her hands. Theta tells everyone to evacuate and begs Yuki not to activate the device as even a little exposure could have major consequences. Yuki isn't listening at all as she states that her mission is of national importance and the desperate girl activates the device. In the city, Adonis continues to laugh like a maniac but is shocked when his magic is stopped. Everyone at headquarters sees that Adonis has dropped his quill and Yamato desperately asks how Yuki is. Theta tells them that it was nothing, but we see that she and Yuki are severely injured. While Theta turns off the device, Yamato desperately wants to know what happened, but Theta reminds him to focus on the task in front of him. She questions if Adonis is really someone that they can't be without suppressing magic and asks him if they should really be having this much trouble against him. He recalls that his duty is to quickly exterminate those who harm the Empire, and she declares with great pride that they are Redia, the indestructible Empire. Yamato was inspired and commands all the units to charge. Adonis takes off in an attempt to get his quill, but it's too late as the soldiers are already prepared to fire. One very angry Karen gets in the line of fire. Fury said Adonis for harming their nation. A building collapses between them and the other soldiers, but this one Karen couldn't care less and pulls out her thermal blade. Adonis wonders if he's finally going to die and is glad that he will be able to reunite with Chloe. The soldier doesn't hold back at all and takes his head off with one strike. The other soldiers can hardly see anything, but the girl eventually emerges from the smoke with Adonis's head. She states that she ended the witch's apprentice. Everyone celebrates and she is hailed as a hero. Everyone at headquarters celebrates as well and Yamato sighs in relief. Yamato commands his troops but reminds them not to celebrate just yet. They still need to collect his body and confirm the damage done to each area of the city. Yamato is informed that the soldier that ended Adonis is a new recruit of the armored foot soldiers. His assistant wants to look into her further, but Yamato tells them to not bother as it's far more important to see how Director Theta and Vice Director Yuki are doing. the proudly Yamato determines that Theta was right, their nation is strong. However, we see that Theta wasn't strong enough as shredded up body is being taken away, and so is Yuki. We then watched as Emperor Gerda gives another one of his classic and legendary speeches with tubes seemingly coming out of every part of his body to keep him from flatlining mid-sentence. He announces that magic somehow survived and the abominable witches still remained in this world. The boy they took from the witches' hands 10 years ago has been unleashed upon the world, and it's the worst possible outcome. It's the long-term prisoner and witch's apprentice Adonis. Despite being human like them, Adonis is a remnant of the terrible old world enthralled by magic. Gerda showing what it would look like if life support needed life support explains that even after 10 years, they have failed to determine how Adonis was able to use magic as a human. Gerda reveals that he's enraged at himself for allowing Adonis to live, but he assures his people by reminding them that the Redia Empire is the pinnacle of the world. The power of science they've acquired and their iron-willed troops will yield to no evil. Gerda, who looks like a USB charging station at this point, wraps up his speech by telling his people to be proud they were born human in the Redia Empire. This psycho states that the old world is gone, God is dead, and their nation is now God. At some random school we see that some girl was watching the speech on HM Tube. The teacher acknowledges that things haven't been easy as a few of their students have died, and we see that some plans on a desk and remembrance of one of them. The teacher's apprentice asks whether Witch's apprentice sided with the witches if he was a human, but the teacher has no clue. Class is over and he probably just wants to get the heck out of there. The red-headed girl is approached by another girl who states that she saw what she did. The redhead instantly knows what she is talking about but defends herself by saying that it was a normal reaction to that situation. The girl decides to leave her alone, but the redhead still hopes that she eats herself off the building. The redhead is named Eri and she goes to the site of the destruction. She is furious at the Empire for not doing their job to protect the people, and we see that she was the girl whose boyfriend was begging for help. She hesitated to help him and ultimately decided to run for her life, leading him to wonder why she would abandon him just before being crushed. She feels terrible for abandoning him, but even worse for being physically attracted to the guy using magic. A guy surprises her and she can instantly tell that he is with the government. She tries to delete the photo she has of Adonis, but the man told her that it's okay and he will keep her secret. He points out that the witch's apprentice is the heinous criminal who caused the disaster, but he wouldn't snitch on her. Eri apologizes and takes her leave. We quickly find out that this guy's name is Osgorgeous and he is a two-faced jerk. He makes a call to give the girl's exact location. He explains that she seems to have been influenced by the terrorist and ordered that she be seized. He wants the National Security Bureau to decide what will happen to her, but he is certain that she will either be executed or imprisoned for treason. He exclaims that inspecting the disaster area is pretty exhausting but is told that the final check is complete. Oz decides to return to base and tells the girl over the phone named Charmy to give him a hug and a kiss when he gets back. Charmy is obviously annoyed and requests that Chief Oz address her transfer request so she can get the heck out of there. She has had enough of working overtime every day and the boss who abuses their power and harasses her. Moving on from that though, she reveals that some unbelievable analysis just came in and asks Oz to return right away. As we see that Adonis is there, she shockingly reveals that the body they captured is a fake, and we see that Adonis wakes up somewhere else. The story continues. We see Adonis lying on a bed struggling against unknown witches who are holding him down. The witches monitor his vitals while he's unconscious. The witches are scared because he won't last very long in this state. Adonis keeps screaming and then his pupils roll down from his head. Lady Ophelia, the leader of the witches, tells them not to give up. She walks over to Adonis and restores his senses by stimulating his brain. After working her magic, Adonis wakes up back on the battlefield. He sees his body lifeless at the female soldier's feet and gets confused. She introduces herself as Anna and explains she used her magic to make a duplicate of him. She reveals herself as a witch who along Daroka infiltrated the country. She tells Adonis it was all a plan to resurrect Chloe. She assures him she'll get him to safety. Adonis doesn't trust her and tries to question her. She tells him off and asks Madame Ophelia to send him off. Adonis is engulfed by a ball of linen which floats into the sky. Anna watches as the ball disappears out of sight. She is sad that Daroka is now on another planet. Adonis wakes up back in the midst of the unknown witches. He falls off the bed shivering. Madame Ophelia hugs him, thanking him for fighting for them. Adonis brushes her off, asking her who she is. Adonis looks around and recognizes the place as the Nation of Witches. Adonis is put in a wheelchair and shown around. The atmosphere around the Nation of Witches is happy and cheerful. Two witches are standing by a group of pillars. One of them calls out to him, happy he is now in good health, and Adonis stops to talk to them. She tells him Chloe would be sad if anything happened to him. The other one agrees. He asks them if they'd met Chloe before. They tell him she was a kind witch who took care of them when they were younger. They tell him they loved her. Adonis just heaves a sigh of sadness. He beckons on the witch who is pushing his wheelchair to keep on going. Adonis is brought before Ophelia. He tells the witch pushing his wheelchair to let him walk, but Madame Ophelia refuses. She tells him humans are not allowed to walk on their land. She tells him he has taken a very complex path to get to their nation and any slight mistake could have grave consequences. She tells him his body was placed under a lot of stress. Adonis checks himself to make sure he doesn't have any serious injuries. He asks her what she did to him, but she simply tells him she invited him over to their nation. Addressing him as Chloe's apprentice, she tells him everyone knew Chloe because she was a kind and smart witch. However, Chloe was cast out of the witch's nation. Adonis accuses her of being the instigator of Chloe's exile because she taught magic to him, humans. Ophelia asks him if Chloe told him about it, but he replies he's spent enough time around her to know that. Madame Ophelia tells him the magic of witches is sacred to them. She tells him the magic bestowed upon them represents their devotion to lead humankind. She tells him it's not something a human should be taught. They could never understand why Chloe decided to take a human apprentice. Every witch begged Chloe to abandon Adonis and return to the witch nation, but she refused. Despite all their pleadings, Chloe apologized to them and walked away. Ophelia tells Adonis despite everything she's still loved by all. Adonis angrily asks her if she's done reminiscing. She stretches out her hand and summons Adonis' quill over her palm. She tells him he can have it back. He gets up from his wheelchair and rushes towards Ophelia. He pushes away a witch who is in his way like a useless sheet of paper. He tells Ophelia to give back his magic quill. Ophelia calmly admires the quill, calling it a true masterpiece. She floats it over to Adonis, telling him it's clear Chloe made it for him. Adonis holds the quill close to his chest with love and sadness. He says no one else could have made such a quill for him. Adonis asks Ophelia if she can bring back Chloe from the other world. She tells him witches do not lie. Adonis raises his head and sighs with contentment. He opens his eyes and he's shocked by what he sees. He can see the earth to the distance. Ophelia tells him the witch nation is a place no human can reach. She tells him that they arrived at the moon years ago and they made it a home for witches to live peacefully. She calls it Lunamelia, the new witch nation far out of the reach of humans. Madame Ophelia explains to Adonis that the advent of technology revealed humankind's true nature. She tells him perhaps the earth was made spherical so humans cannot see too far ahead because God feared for their future. Adonis tells her he doesn't buy it. Ophelia turns around and shows Adonis the gravestones of scores of witches who have lost their lives. She tells him humans are always constrained by emotions and social constraints. These emotions and social standards have blinded humans to the real truth. She tells him how the king believed that witches would corrupt humankind. She takes admits to a tree. She tells him the tree is called Meadow and it's capable of producing witches. He looks up at the tree and on the tree there are different nests housing witches and production. She tells him that witches, unlike humans, they do not have mating pairs, instead they receive life from the meadow tree's fruits. She thinks her explanation would amaze Adonis, but he's indifferent. She tells Adonis the tree is the last surviving tree brought from Earth. She tells him humans burnt down the other trees. Adonis looks through a certain nest and he's surprised. Ophelia tells him it's the only tree that can give birth to and regenerate witches. He walks closer to the tree in disbelief as he sees a regenerating Chloe. He reaches out his hand towards the nest and asks Ophelia if that is Chloe. She tells him it's not, it's just a witch waiting to be born. She tells him for her to become Chloe, she would need his strength. Adonis doesn't understand what she means. She tells Adonis that magic is the act of giving one's thoughts physical form in the material world. She tells him the written style summoning magic he uses can be used to give form to anything, depending on how good he is. She tells him his magic is enough to make anything happen. She tells Adonis that he could seal all his memories into the fruit witch and make her become Chloe. She tells him he's the key to Chloe's resurrection. Adonis looks determined and Ophelia starts walking away from the tree. She tells Adonis let her know when he's ready to begin the ceremony. She walks away, leaving Adonis standing alone before the tree. Adonis lies down on the grass and contemplates his choice. He can't believe his magic will resurrect Chloe. At that moment, Anna appears before him. She asks him if he doesn't have something to say to her. Adonis condescendingly asks her if she expects thanks from him. She tells him he can't possibly be serious with tears rolling down her cheeks. She tells him Doroka gave her life for him. Adonis tells her it's not his problem since she was the one who planned out his escape. Anna is angered by his remark, but he walks away. Anna calls him back telling him she's not done talking. She tells him humans are so selfish. She tells him he must feel lucky to be able to revive Chloe as much as he wants with the help of the tree. She wonders why they risk their lives for someone like him. This makes Adonis stop. He turns back and angrily tells her they saved him so he could bring Chloe back so that they could use her. She asks him what he means, but he tells her not to play dumb. He recalls Daroka's last words while she was in his arms. She told him that the witch nation was planning to use Chloe. Adonis tells Anna that the witches could live in an environment that's hostile to humans. He tells her they didn't need to build the dome, but they built it to keep humans in. He tells her how the witches plan to kidnap humans with their magic and teach them written-style magic so they can fight. He tells her since witches are near extinction and they need a new source of soldiers. He tells her it's only because Chloe makes quills, that's why the witches want her resurrected. Anna is even more surprised. She grabs his shoulder and asks what he's going to do, and she asks him to help them so Daroka's death won't be in vain. Adonis tells her he'll resurrect Chloe, but anything after that is up to Chloe. He tells her if Chloe doesn't approve of them, then they will become his enemy. Later in the day, Ophelia and the witches begin the ceremony. Adonis approaches the tree and uses his magic to cast a summoning spell from his memory. The magic is absorbed by the unborn fruit witch. Adonis remembers when Chloe was teaching him about Falulu, the witch's constellation. He was bored of her teachings because he'd heard it over and over. He points out other constellations she taught him to her. She's impressed Adonis was able to memorize the constellations. She thinks he's a magic prodigy and she must be some kind of god to be his teacher. He points out a constellation called Adonis constellation and accuses Chloe of making it up. Chloe can't seem to remember it and they both begin to argue and Adonis snaps out of his memory. He cherished the time he spent with Chloe, feeling like it was all a dream compared to his present reality. He remembers when Chloe always left her clothes around the house. Chloe is washing herself and asks him to leave the clothes on the floor. Adonis tells her he'll put them away. Adonis looks through the curtain to see Chloe with different bruises on her body. Chloe tells him not to spy. He tells her he is worried because of how long she's been there. He tells her he'll go and stay and watch. He urges Chloe to take her bath quickly before their pursuers catch up to them. Chloe thanks him for staying with her as tears fall down her cheeks. She tells him she can't live alone. Adonis is moved by her statement. Back to the present, Adonis admits he can't live alone as well. The witch fruit keeps absorbing his magic. Adonis professes his love for her and Chloe's voice thanks him. The fruit glows bright, lighting up the fields. All the witches stare at the fruit hopeful. The fruit finally opens up and starts revealing its new form, but instead of Chloe, it's Daroka who comes out. The story continues. Adonis remembers when he asked Ophelia if she could bring Chloe from the dead. Ophelia confirmed, mentioning that witches never lie, but Adonis knew that was a lie. Ophelia talked about how the evolution of science made humanity reveal its true nature against the witches or created by God to guide humans into the future. However, Adonis knew that was a lie and that Ophelia planned to use Chloe in attack. Adonis was crying while performing the spell to bring Chloe back to life. He wanted to see her again, but he refused to revive her. He loved her too much to see her being used by her own kind. He felt like she had no place in this world anymore, and that's why he used another spell called Replace. He used it to rewrite the ritual and revive Daroka instead. He picked her up as her body fell from the tree and said he didn't want his depth of Daroka saving his life to be unpaid. Daroka was confused when she saw Adonis. She looked around and saw Ophelia and the others, recognizing she was in Lunamelia. She remembers being shot until she realizes she has no clothes on. She gets shy and gets some distance from Adonis. She apologizes for showing her true form, but Adonis simply drops his jacket on her. He tells her that there are even as she saved him before and orders her to put it on. However, Daroka is confused and asks what about Chloe. Ophelia calmly asks why he betrayed them despite their help. She says that they tried their best to bring Chloe from the dead. They also risked themselves to rescue him and heal his wounds. They tried everything to guarantee his safety, but he betrayed them. The other witches blame him for being a human. They accuse him of never having loved Chloe because in the end he chose to revive Daroka instead. Ophelia orders Daroka to tell her what she did to him. She thinks Daroka has put some idea in Adonis's head. Daroka doesn't know what to say, but Adonis simply says he won't resurrect Chloe and order the witches to shut up. Ophelia starts laughing at the situation and calls him a mere human. She asks why he's trying to show off, but suddenly summoning particles start to appear. Ophelia doesn't understand what's going on and asks what Adonis has done. Adonis simply smiles like the crazy guy he is and reveals a chip. He explains that humanity arrested him for 10 years, so they had put a tracking device on him. He then reveals to Ophelia that witches aren't the ones who will destroy humanity, all because he will do it by himself. He destroys the chip and throws it, creating a huge explosion. The Mito tree starts burning to Ophelia's distress. However, there's a bigger problem. Yamato managed to reach the moon. He never thought that he would be able to find the last Mito tree there. More human soldiers get summoned to the moon and Yamato starts threatening everyone. Adonis laughs, mentioning he's the one who invited them there and promising this will become their new graveyard. The witches start using their water magic to make it rain and extinguish the fire. However, the rain stops because they start losing their heads. Literally, the witches cannot believe what's going on and Ophelia orders them to enter the formation. The girls quickly use their Sailor Moon transformation to get into their battle attackers. The battle begins with Adonis and Yamato. Yamato quickly attacks with his sword, injuring Adonis. The witches and soldiers also start their confrontation at the same time, but the attention goes to Adonis, who uses magic to steal Yamato's gun and shoots him. Yamato feels ashamed of his mistake and employs his defensive gear. However, Adonis is simply walking and shooting him. Adonis pins him to the ground with several shots, asking why Yamato doesn't get up. However, Daroka holds onto his jacket. Adonis tries to ask what she wants, but she doesn't reply. Meanwhile, the witches use their magic to attack the soldiers. One makes crystals grow and the soldiers' bodies, stopping them from breathing. There's the nerd one, who turns the soldiers into hosts of centipedes, the Medusa girl who has a snake bigger than yours, the one who watches Guardians of the Galaxy and attacks with tree roots, and you also have the game addict who turns a bow into a machine gun. Ophelia also decides to show off her magic, revealing that she uses gravity. The soldiers levitate in the air and create a huge ball as she raises her hand. They try to shoot her, but the path of the bullet is bent in the end. After accumulating enough soldiers, she crushes them all together. She starts celebrating, mentioning how weak humans are. However, human reinforcements arrive. The first switch to drop is the centipede girl. The witches cannot believe their luck, especially Ophelia, who has realized that humans outnumber them. Meanwhile, on Earth, everyone is watching the live stream of what's happening on the moon. They cannot believe there are so many witches still alive because they thought they wiped them all 10 years ago. They believe that witches used their science to flee from Earth and ask Theta for an explanation. She only has a few months because she was exposed to the magic canceling device. She complies with orders and confirms they are right. She shows images of the -89 model and explains it was a physical transfer prototype they've dumped into space 10 years ago. However, the remaining witches that were alive captured, they used it to create a hidden structure on the moon and used magic to camouflage their astronomical wave from the humans. Theta once again confirms, but one of the guys gets mad. He claims that the Science Institute received a huge annual budget and used to be considered their pride. Yet, they still allowed this to happen. He threatens that this failure will cost them more than her life because everyone thinks that witches were exterminated 10 years ago. However, there's this sunglasses weirdo named Shirasaki who claims this doesn't matter. People think witches are all gone, so they simply need to exterminate every witch on the moon. Meanwhile, Yamato is having a flashback after becoming a bullet bag. His sister is in critical condition after activating the anti-magic device. He explains that Yuki decided to follow in his footsteps and enter national security. She always did her best to stay by his side, and they climbed the ranks together. He knows that job never suited her personality, but she did it anyway. That's why he thinks she's amazing, but there's a problem. This dummy Yamato decided to order his sister to activate the anti-magic device deal with Adonis, and now she's suffering from his dumb decisions, but he blames, you guessed it, Adonis. He wakes up to reality and increases his suit output to 500%. Adonis is already tired of this guy and tries to shoot him. However, the suit's physical enhancement allows him auto to move faster than before. He manages to land a punch on Adonis and promises to kill him for siding with the witches. Daroka tries to check on Adonis, but he tells her to wake up and pay attention to what Yamato is doing. Yamato powers up his suit, hoping to finish this battle and return to his normal life with Yuki. He calls Adonis a heretic while promising himself that he will retire and live in a quiet place with his sister. He then uses his anti-witch skill, unleashing a huge attack that slices most of the witches in the area in half. Even Ophelia is turned into ground meat. However, Adonis manages to avoid it using his matrix moves, with even our cutie Daroka was sliced in half. Luckily, her friend Anna managed to cast her magic to create Dorothy's clone and canceled her death. Daroka is happy to see her friend also managed to survive, but Anna simply loses her head, telling her that she loves her. Literally, Daroka cannot believe her eyes and screams. Meanwhile, humanity's headquarters tries to contact the attack force because they lost all the video stream. We see Daroka crying because she cannot believe she just lost her best friend. She tears down begging for this stupid war to stop. She doesn't understand why humans and witches are trying to fight each other. Meanwhile, Adonis is still standing and promising to delete Yamato. Yamato cannot count because he contacts the headquarters and says every witch is gone and claims that Adonis is the only one left. Adonis quickly uses his spell to get some armor in his arms and tries to punch Yamato. The sword dude blocks and tries to counter, but Adonis jumps to avoid the attack. He then uses magic to prepare his punch while descending, which is blocked by Yamato again. However, the sword breaks and Adonis manages to piercing a model's chest. Adonis tries to follow up with another attack, but Yamato blocks it. He tries to regenerate his suit and sword, but Adonis dodges it. We find out there are actually several witches still alive who are watching the two fight. Ophelia says they should never give up, but the witches have lost all their faith. The Meadow trees burn, which means that witches will never be born again. Medusa Girl tries to motivate everyone to get up and help Adonis, but more human soldiers are summoned and start wiping every single one. Meanwhile, Yamato uses a skill to block Adonis' flying punch. He then manages to pierce out in his chest and thinks that he won. However, Adonis has been preparing for this moment. He activates his Kali Bum spell, which summons a huge sword that slices Yamato's arm off. The last few remaining witches are begging for mercy, but the soldiers refuse to. Yamato then uses his suit's abilities to stop the bleeding, and Adonis notices his eyes. He knows both of them seek revenge. Yamato calls Adonis too dangerous and steps forward to end him. However, Adonis simply says no. Minutes later, at the National Science Agency headquarters, everyone is panicking because they don't have a video stream of what's happening. They wonder if everyone was wiped out by the witches, but some refuse to accept it, mentioning Yamato is leading the mission. They suddenly start receiving some signal and make the video connection. They see Yamato holding his face. He tells everyone that every witch on the moon's surface has been wiped out and they won the battle. Humanity starts celebrating their win. However, if you notice, Yamato's eyes this time are colored red. The story continues. We return minutes after the fact to not long before Yamato is going to strike down Adonis. Adonis has no fear, but Daroka yells for all that to stop. Yamato is in disbelief as he can't move his own body, and Adonis is impressed as it's clear that Daroka has a wide range of spells. She has just cast a love spell and it affects all the soldiers as well. She introduces herself and Yamato gives his name, but it was completely against his own will. His mouth opened on its own, so he realizes that this spell he is under is incredibly dangerous. The other witches watch and begin to think that Daroka might be able to turn things around with her special magic. Yamato demands that she remove her spell, but she refuses. Our revenge-seeking protagonist is thirsty for blood and tells Daroka to end Yamato's life by tearing out his throat. Yamato's rage turns to shock when Daroka simply extends him her hand and pleads for all the fighting to stop. She wants him to shake her hand and promise that he won't attack Adonis or the other witches. If he just makes this promise, then she will free everyone from the spell. Our jaded protagonist becomes furious, though, as he reminds her that they killed Anna. His revenge-filled brain can't comprehend what she's doing, and he calls her crazy for even thinking of letting the humans leave alive. The other witches agree as he points out all the lives they have taken, and he warns her that the humans will likely take her life if she doesn't end them first. Yamato proves to be a psycho as well, as he says that Adonis is right and somehow manages to attack Daroka. He tells her to know her place and explains that the humans will use their science to exterminate them all. He rains punches down on her while telling her how naive she was to think that they could have peace between them. To the humans, witches are cursed that bring terror and chaos, and their mere existence is destroying the world. Yamato is releasing all his anger as he points out how much harm the witch's apprentice has done to humanity. He has taken countless innocent lives, and he wouldn't have existed if not for the horrible witches. Yamato wants the witches to finally just accept their extermination, and we see that the soldiers are able to move again. Yamato thinks about how Yuki wouldn't be in the condition she is in if it wasn't for the witches, and he beats Daroka relentlessly. Daroka somehow manages to speak and tells him that the humans have taken countless lives as well, not even just the massacre they just did right now, but the extermination of witches 10 years ago. Daroka understands that the humans feel like they don't need the witches anymore because they have their precious science, but she can't understand why they feel the need to exterminate the witches. She points out that humans and witches used to be friends, and once again pleads that they put an end to the fighting. Daroka would like for him to start by ordering the retreat of his men, but Yamato's still filled with rage. She casts her love spell on him again, and Yamato begins to feel strange. He shows his intense resolve though as he reminds himself who he is, and proclaims that he won't be beaten by some magic spell. He tries really hard to break the spell, but he then imagines himself as a child hugging Daroka, and this to get simplified by her spell. With loving eyes you might tell Daroka that he will obey her, but he just ends up with a blade through his skull. Of course, it was a rage-filled protagonist, and he explains that revenge is all he has. Daroka can't believe what she just saw and is furious with Adonis. He is completely single-minded though, as he realizes how strong Daroka's love spell is, and he tells her that they will use her magic to destroy humanity. At the royal palace, the king is told that their strike force is still fighting and they are not sure if the witches will be defeated, as they are putting up quite a fight. Unfortunately, their communication with headquarters is poor, so they aren't sure of all the details. The king once again asks if they will defeat the witches, so the terrified soldier just tells him that he believes their victory is certain. The queen wonders if the witch's apprentice is there as well, and they are both glad to hear that he is. The king graces us with his impeccable mustache and demands that his soldiers burn the witches along with the entire moon if they have to. This genocidal maniac rejoices as he sees that the end is nearing for all the witches and the brat who wanted revenge against humanity. This guy that was just giving really convincing speeches just a few episodes ago is really losing his mind now, as he laughs like a maniac. He calls the witches sore losers for running off to the moon, but states that they can never escape. The king wants to be assured by his wife, so he asked her to tell him how incredible he is and asked for her to praise him. He's really having his moment now, as he has finally achieved his goal of exterminating the witches, and everyone celebrates. The poor soldier that has had to listen to his psychiatric rant thinks about how he had heard that the king's condition was deteriorating, but he had no idea it was this bad. He is then shocked as the queen holds the king and tells him that everything is going to be okay. The king just acts like a baby sometimes and needs to be praised. She praises him for enduring so much trust for such a long time, and the king just keeps repeating over and over again how much he loves her. We then see why the king is like this, as the queen shockingly uses the love spell on him. She compliments him for finally eliminating the witches and tells him that he can end his own life now. She has some little Boy Scouts play a little tune, and she praises the king for walking as if he were a toddler. The king has a jolly old time as he makes his way to the ledge, but the soldier is shocked and wonders what is wrong with the king. King Go with is completely gone at this point and explains that he has always given the queen what she wanted. He is truly the king of Sims, so he will gladly give his own life to make her happy. The king is proud of himself for climbing up to the best spot, but the soldier begs for him to come down. Emperor Goeth refuses to be stopped, and this stuff all his accomplishments as a great leader. He made several scientific advancements and made the Redia Empire the strongest nation in the world. He eradicated the witches, and he did all these things for his beloved queen. Goeth is completely under the simplification spell, as he states that he wishes he could serve his queen forever. Of course, the queen loves to hear this, but she clearly doesn't care a single bit about him and simply tells him to hurry up and jump. Emperor Goeth graces us with his immaculate mustache one last time and eagerly jumps off the building. The queen removes the spell, and we see that there is no coming back for the king. The soldier who witnessed it all calls for backup, since there is clearly a witch in the castle, but the queen says that the king just slipped and fell. She uses her simplification magic on this poor guy, so he corrects himself and reports that the king accidentally fell to his death. Shirosaji, the guy from that meeting with Professor X, has apparently been there the entire time, and the queen tells him to speak as he clearly has something on his mind. She wonders if she shouldn't have ended the king's life, but Shirosaji couldn't care less, and points out that that puppet was no longer necessary. The queen points out that her spell only works on men. Her kind is too much of a threat against her, so that is why they needed to be eliminated. Shirosaji points out that the world can be hers now, but she calls him an idiot as she doesn't want this world. He should already know what she really wants, and she threatens to take his life just like this poor soldier's if he doesn't bring her Adonis's real head this time. Shirosaji promises the queen that he won't fail her, but she proclaims that she is no longer a queen. She then reveals her true identity as the witch of the unknown named Dorothea. Her goal is to get someone back, and we see that this person looks like a red-headed version of Adonis. Back on the moon, Daroka rejects Adonis's plan to use her magic to destroy humankind. Adonis is clearly demented as he still smiles and tells Daroka not to release her spell. He goes after the soldiers who still can't move and tells them to cry the same way he did when they took Chloe's life. Daroka begs him to stop, but it's far too late as our protagonist slices through all their troops. Daroka can only watch in horror, but she knows what she must do. She never wanted to have to use her spell on him, but Adonis clearly won't stop otherwise. Adonis something appears before her and threatens to make her live again if she tries to cast her spell on him. Adonis continues his massacre as the soldiers beg for their lives and brochures to tell him that this won't change anything. Revenge will only give birth to more revenge. Adonis isn't in the mood to be lectured, but Daroka explains that she's just tired of all the fighting, all the death is too sad for her to take, but Adonis is practically the opposite as he can't stop. He finishes up all the soldiers and finds Yamato to steal his face. Adonis vows to make the humans pay with their extinction and uses a spell to change his voice to Yamato's. We then go back to the present. When Adonis, pretending to be Yamato, reports back to headquarters, he explains that the battle was fierce and none other witches survived. Unfortunately, aside from himself, none of the humans did either. Yamato explains that he will be returning alone and he tells them to bring him back, but we see that Theta can tell that this thing they are looking at is not Yamato. Some witches that are watching are horrified and we see that Adonis is using Yamato's face as a mask. He once again commands that they teleport him back and he promises to bring back the head of the witch's apprentice. Ophelia's upper body is still somehow alive and she realizes that this is what Adonis is planned all along. Adonis tries to take Daroka with him since her spell will be very useful, but she refuses. Daroka must have a death wish as she slaps Adonis and points out how ashamed Chloe would be if she saw what he was doing. Luckily for her, Adonis doesn't go all crazy on her as the transportation has been initiated. Ophelia's heart is still just pumping away, so she bids farewell to Adonis, the infinitely evil child of the wicked humans. She hopes that God will judge him for his crimes and she apologizes to her fellow witches for failing to reclaim their dignity. Ophelia finally bids farewell to this world, enter the kingdoms of ruin. Adonis and Daroka are being teleported and Adonis does something entirely unexpected. He says he is sorry for some reason. Back at headquarters, they prepare for Yamato's return. However, Theta already knows that it's Adonis that will be coming back and they are ready. She vows to avenge Yamato's death as the teleportation countdown reaches 0 and she commands all the soldiers to open fire. Things continue. The gunfire stops soon after as nothing was teleported and it is announced that transfer coordinates were somehow changed. His signal is lost and Theta collapses as her body is falling apart. She realizes that he escaped and tells the witch's apprentice that he has won this round. Somewhere out in the desert, we find the Daroka and Adonis. Adonis tells her to look at a constellation that confirmed they are back on the planet's surface. Our MC is covered in blood but has a huge goal. He declares that the two of them will begin their conquest of the Redia Empire by doing whatever they have to, and they will start small. We then get a glimpse of what happened just before the teleportation. Daroka was begging Adonis to help the witches that were still alive on the moon, but Adonis was too busy using his voice-changing magic to change the teleportation coordinates automatically. Our vengeful protagonist decides that they will attack cities and villages on their way to Redia. They will also gather information and supplies to prepare themselves. Adonis is thinking way ahead and is ready to move, but Daroka isn't having any of it. She wants to go back to the other witches, but Adonis calls her stupid for thinking that any of the witches on the moon survived. She refuses to believe that they all died and tells them to send her back. He calls her a spoiled child, but Daroka gets released and happy with him, and wonders if he's talking about himself. She thinks that he is clearly more childish, since all he cares about is revenge. Adonis then uses his memory magic. He shows Daroka how she pleaded for Yamato to take her hand or promising that he wouldn't hurt him anymore. She can't bear to watch her failure and Adonis now realizes why Daroka didn't fit in with the other witches. The other witches hated the humans, and only a psychopath like her would want to reconcile with them. Daroka reveals that she always wanted to meet with Adonis one day, because she wanted to know what kind of person Chloe chose as her apprentice. Adonis was a man living between two worlds, so she had hoped that he could become a bridge between humans and witches. He was her only hope, but she couldn't be more wrong. It's clear to Adonis now that she knows nothing about him, and she wonders how far he will go. Humankind will never forgive him, the same way he will never forgive them, so the fighting will never stop. Adonis silences her and states that Chloe's life is more precious than all of humanity. The world that took her from him made a huge mistake and deserves to be destroyed. This pink-haired girl just can't understand his rage and wonders how much he is willing to sacrifice. She blames him for what happens to all the witches on the moon because he's summoned the humans there, but he points out that summoning humans was the only way to get them back to Earth. All her friends were just pawns in his plan, and Daroka somehow still can't believe how cold-hearted he is. She becomes really upset since those witches battled so hard to survive the witch hunt, only to become pawns in his selfish plan, but Adonis silences her again. He can't understand how she can continue to argue for the humans when they took so many of her friends' lives. Adonis accuses her of committing the greatest crime against their lives by not wanting revenge. Daroka still disagrees and states of revenge won't heal any wounds. Adonis ever doesn't care anymore. He begins to walk away as he says that he has nothing left to lose. Daroka just won't let it go as she tackles him and reminds Adonis that he still has the life that Chloe works so hard to protect in a world filled with cruelty. Daroka begs they cannot let it change him. She isn't even asking him to forgive the humans. Daroka just knows that if he continues seeking revenge, then will shatter his heart and he will become more like the people that took Chloe from him. Daroka thinks he still has plenty to lose, but the two just can't understand each other's. Revenge is proof of Adonis's existence and irreplaceable proof that Chloe lived with him. Adonis feels like every last trace of Chloe's existence would simply vanish if he stopped seeking revenge, and that thought terrifies him. Daroka breaks down in tears and Adonis prints out all she does is cry. They seem to finally be understanding each other a little bit, but Daroka realizes that Adonis's health is declining rapidly. A bunch of bikers spot them in the distance, and wonder if there are a couple that just eloped. Their ringleader is called Mr. Punch and he's left to decide what will be done with them. Sometime later, Adonis wakes up in a strange place. Our MC is getting pretty tired of waking up in places he doesn't recognize, and tries to remember what happened. He remembers Daroka asking the bikers for help, as he was quickly losing blood and couldn't move. Mr. Punch arrives to welcome him, and wonders if the cold looking on Adonis's eyes means that he has taken someone's life. This guy doesn't have the slightest clue and simply offers Adonis a drink. Adonis has no interest in drinking sewer water, but Punch explains that it's actually a man's greatest invention. Adonis just wants to know where Daroka is, and Punch explains as she was watching over Adonis until a second ago when some of the youngsters took her away. Adonis isn't playing any game, so he asks him again where she is, so Punch takes him outside. Punch welcomes him to the wastelands, a place filled with people from developing countries, refugees and slaves who escaped from Redia. Everyone left behind by science simply ends up there and becomes a vagrant. Just then Adonis hears Daroka's voice begging for someone to stop. She is surrounded by men, so Adonis wonders what they are doing to her. Punch explains that they don't get many women in their wastelands and grossly says that Adonis' girlfriend is really good at screaming. Adonis has had enough of these people and instantly rushes to save Daroka. He prepares to annihilate all the scum but is shocked when he sees that Daroka is just learning to ride a motorcycle. She was begging for someone to stop the motorcycle, but all the guys are just encouraging her to learn. Daroka is glad to see that Adonis is awake, but she face plants straight into the ground. She is concerned about his injuries, but she looks to be in pretty bad shape herself. Daroka gives Adonis some little figurines and apologizes for not realizing how injured he was. Our MC is just as cold as ever though, and tosses the little things. Punch declares that they will be throwing a party and has our door will help prepare his payment for rescue them. That night, everyone gets hammered and Daroka serves their drinks. Some old dude tries to get smooch with her, but she leaves him in the dust. Adonis isn't in the partying mood, which makes Daroka a bit sad, so some guys wonder if she's in the middle of a fight with her boyfriend. She tries to clear things up about them not being together, but no one believes her. They want to know what their story is, so Daroka says that her and her friend are traveling the world. They all have a good laugh as they can't believe they would come visit the wastelands, but they all think that she's a really nice girl. Just send the guy, shockingly begin collapsing. Daroka has no clue what is happening, but Adonis called them all idiots for not being more careful with what they put in their mouth. Daroka fears the worst as she questions if Adonis poisoned them, but he hasn't. He simply used his magic to change their alcohol's formula into a tranquilizer. Daroka is just glad that everyone is still alive, but Adonis says that won't be for long as he finds a gun. Daroka begs him to stop and points out that they have all been so kind to them. They rescued them from the desert, and even gave them medical aid. Adonis couldn't care less, but Daroka points out that if it wasn't for them, his life would have ended in the desert. Adonis explains that he isn't going to end their lives, but only because vagrants like them are not worth killing. Adonis then shocks her when he reveals that he no longer needs her. She wants an explanation, so he says that unlike her, he can't laugh after losing someone important to him. He can't even imagine relaxing and joking around. Adonis has determined that they are fundamentally incompatible. Daroka explains her behavior by pointing out that bad things will happen if humans find out who they really are. They have to blend in with them because she can't let them suspect that she is a witch. Daroka laughs to keep up appearances, but there's no way she could really just be fine after what happened. Adonis just silences her once again to tell her never to end up like him, and he leaves. The next morning, Mr. Punch wonders if Daroka's boyfriend left. She corrects him about Adonis's not being her boyfriend, and Punch can't help but point out how brazen Adonis is. He left without so much as a thank you, and left Daroka there all on her own. Punch thinks that she made the right decision by breaking up with him. Daroka can see something in Adonis that no one else can know, and she knows that he is actually really kind. We then see Adonis all alone, as he thinks about everything Daroka told him. She has made a serious impression and our cold-hearted protagonist with all her advice, but he actually hates it. Just then he sees that someone has come after him, and he wonders if he made the tranquilizer too weak. He then suspects that it might be someone from the Redia Empire. It doesn't really matter who it is though, so he prepares for a fight and declares that he will end the life of anyone gets in his way. Back in the wastelands, Daroka is absolutely stunned when Mr. Punch reveals that he knew that Adonis was the witch's apprentice all along. Daroka tries to deny it, but it's no use. Mr. Punch says that Adonis is a completely different man now and has a memory from his past. He was dying in the desert when Chloe the Ice Witch and her young apprentice saved him. Mr. Punch explains that the greatest happiness a man can know is having something worth fighting against the entire world for. This guy is the wisest biker you will ever see, and he explains that you will never settle an argument over whether or not revenge is wrong. Adonis has chosen revenge, and even if it leads to his death, that is his choice. He wonders what Daroka plans to do, and she explains that she doesn't want anyone else to die because she failed to protect Anna and the others. Daroka refuses to let Adonis die, so Mr. Punch wonders what she's still doing there talking to him. We then see that the one coming after Adonis was actually Daroka, and he wonders if she is trying to end his life. Daroka promises to not get in his way and has to let her travel with him. Adonis is shocked as Daroka explains that she gave us some thought and thinks that Adonis does need her. It's dangerous to travel alone, and give company makes traveling seem quicker. She thinks they would both benefit, but Adonis just wonders why she didn't stop. He can't believe what a noisy girl she is, and Adonis chases after the out-of-control Daroka. Mr. Punch just hopes that Adonis won't make Daroka cry and wishes luck to Chloe's beloved apprentice. Story continues. In the capital of Redia, everyone is celebrating the coronation of their new emperor. The presenter talks about how everyone is mourning the loss of their emperor. However, this is the time to rejoice and appoint a new successor, who turns out to be his former wife, Emperor Dorothea. She presents herself as a literal idol, making literally every man in the empire fall in love with her. They all expect a great future with her as a ruler. However, deep far away there's a guy not so happy about this situation. He's watching everything on his phone and doesn't understand how the world reached this point. He knows that she's a witch, who used science to destroy her own kind, and now she's the biggest ruler of human. The guy says how she's even crazier than the prophecies had mentioned. Meanwhile, in the wastelands we see Shirasaji. This guy is literally having a nosebleed after checking the coronation on his phone, even mentioning how Dorothea is a goddess. However, there's something disturbing him, the fact that Adonis destroyed the Yamato's terminal, making him unable to be traced. The guy then gets up, revealing his power to control multiple hands, and mentions that he must look for Adonis, the boy loved by his goddess. Elsewhere, our MC is driving with Daroka. He asks her where she intends to go from now on. Adonis decides to make it clear to her that he won't give up on his revenge. Daroka is shocked, but reveals that she has a suggestion. She mentions that there are a lot of nice people like Mr. Punch, but Adonis sighs and replies with a fat no. He knows she's going to ask him to avoid fighting people like Mr. Punch. He says that he has let her come with him, however, she should never get in his way. She's startled but accepts. He then mentions that there is something that he wants to know about her magic. He assumes that her love magic allows her to manipulate men by making them fall in love with her. Daroka confirms, and he asks why she never used it on him. He mentions that she could have cast it when she first met him in Redia. He's sure that Ophelia ordered her to bring him to the moon, even if it meant that she had to use her magic. In fact, that would be the most efficient way of doing it, but she never cast her magic on him. He doesn't understand why. He asks her why she tried to persuade him instead. With a look in her eyes, Daroka mentions he wouldn't like their first meeting to be like that. Adonis confirms it, mentioning it would be the worst possible way. They later arrive in a small town called Sandland. It looks completely run down, and Daroka asks if it's an empty town. Adonis simply orders her to wait while he takes a look around. However, Daroka is afraid and wants to go with him. She promises she won't be getting in his way, making Adonis feel forced to accept, but he's quite curious about her bag. She replies that Mr. Punch gave it to her before she left. She explains it has several stuff inside, like blankets, bandages, food and drinks. She then pulls out a snowman head, mentioning that it's amazing. She clicks on a button and it turns into a huge tent. She happily mentions how Mr. Punch has some style, but Adonis gets annoyed and walks away. She follows him and they walk around checking the state of the town. Daroka is pretty scared and asks Adonis if he thinks there are real ghosts there. However, Adonis is thinking about something else. He doesn't see any signs of fighting and doesn't understand why there isn't anyone there. They find the police station in the town and think they might get some information. If they search inside, he tells her to be careful because the building is run down and could collapse. However, Daroka gets immediately scared when she sees a mouse jumping around. Not only that, she gets scared with bats and webs. Adonis is pretty annoyed with her reactions, and despite her apology, he simply reminds her to be careful, otherwise he will leave her behind. She tries to follow him in silence. However, a random guy suddenly appears, asking if she's feeling trouble. She screams and hides behind Adonis's back, calling it a ghost. The guy dressed as a police officer welcomes them to the police department, tells the current time and gives some indications. Adonis coldly looks at Daroka, telling her it's a hologram. She's confused, asking if Adonis knows this guy, but our boy replies this is just a 3D image. He walks away calling this situation stupid. However, Daroka bows and answers the hologram that they aren't suspicious people. They continue exploring the building until they reach the cell rooms. This place starts to bring bad memories for both, but Adonis keeps moving forward. He suddenly stops and Daroka was still looking for Ghost's face once into his back. She tries to apologize, but he tells her to be quiet because he hears something. Turns out it's a song and it's coming from the end of the corridor. They walk forward and see an old man playing a mini guitar. The old man is playing while singing his song when Daroka tries to interrupt him. However, the old man doesn't seem to notice him, and after looking at Adonis's face, Daroka shouts at the old man. The man falls from his bed and looks at them and gets surprised. However, he suddenly starts screaming, asking who they are and what's going on. He even mentions this town was supposed to be empty and they shouldn't scare him. Daroka simply replies they're travelers passing by. The old man is still complaining how he almost had a heart attack. He then asks what they're doing in that town because it's pretty obvious that there's nothing else there. He asks if they're on a tour to check some ruins, but Adonis is aggressively asks why he's the only one left there. The old man is confused, mentioning he's only there because he's a prisoner. Adonis then notices a skeleton lying on the bed beside the old man. He starts walking away, making Daroka confused about why he's already leaving. Adonis replies it's pointless to stay there, and he also considers this place to be terrible. Daroka is confused, but the old man smiles. He says that it's funny that Adonis mentioned there's nothing there for them. He claims everyone said the same thing before they left town. He then talks about the gear expansion and how mankind managed to destroy the witches. However, they were still living in poverty. He thinks that the reason people couldn't handle to stay in that town. He talks about how they all proclaim the glorious future of mankind, filled with hope, pride, and they all started to migrate. He thinks this is pretty much the same as 10 years ago. It's as if the witch hunt began once again. He mentions that the person who speaks first and loudest is the person, the rest will follow. However, Adonis simply asks if the metropolis is close to their current location. The old man replies an urban city of Mamuda is close by. Adonis starts walking away, telling Daroka to come. She first apologizes to the old man for interrupting his song, and they leave the building. She then asks Adonis if they shouldn't help the old man. She mentions there isn't anybody else in this town, which will lead him to die from starvation. She thinks they should help him get out of his cell, even if he's a prisoner. Adonis dismisses it, stating it's none of their business. She tries to stop him from walking away and asks if it would be fine to share the food with the old man's. Adonis simply stares at her, thinking how dumb she is for not noticing anything. He then reveals that the old man's cell wasn't even locked. Daroka is confused, but gets even more when Adonis reveals a married couple doesn't need time. They simply need quiet time that won't be disturbed by anyone. We then see the old man sitting the skeleton down while talking to it. The old man mentions the two will continue to sing the song. He tells her not to worry because everyone is gone now, especially those who branded her a witch and locked her inside that cell. The old man tears down, mentioning they will be forever together. He hugs his wife's skeleton, knowing that he failed because he couldn't protect her back then. Adonis then returns to the bike, mentioning this town is empty, but it's still a place for that couple to be alone. He tells the Daroka to jump in, where they will be heading to Mamuda. Story continues. Our protagonist traveled through the desert and finally arrives at their plot-themed destination, Mamuda. They have to go through a very welcoming immigration gate, and Daroka wonders if Adonis really plans to start a fight there. Our boy of course wants to fight everyone, everywhere, all the time, but Daroka fears that a big city like this one has a lot of soldiers and weapons. Adonis is so caught up in revenge that he doesn't understand her point, and she is just worried that not even he will be able to survive. This absolute pink-haired genius comes up with an idea and asks Adonis to play rock, paper, scissors, and the loser will have to do something for the winner, but Adonis is done listening to this girl and declines. She keeps trying to press the issue but instantly stops blabbering when they realize that Mamuda was created by men of culture. The place is also completely run down and Adonis gets upset that this is just another place where he won't be able to get revenge on anything. They have to come to a screeching halt as a woman is on the road, but Adonis must tell the naive Daroka to be careful. She fears that this lady doesn't have much time left and the woman says she must hurry. Daroka thinks that she is running from something, but Adonis realizes that she is not a person and he tells Daroka to get away from her as fast as her stupid legs can take her. Daroka decides to just stand there instead, and the woman turns out to be some kind of robot. This machine does some kind of analysis on Daroka and determines that she ranks low on the pleasure index. That's a pretty strange thing to happen, but this robot gets desperate and decides that it needs pleasure regardless of who it comes from. Luckily, Adonis shoots it down before it can do whatever it was going to do, and finishes it off with another bullet to its robot body. The robot depressingly meets its end, and Adonis reveals that it was a Madoa, a mechanical doll that was created to be a plaything for humans. This anime takes a really strange turn as more of these dolls can be heard developing plot inside a building. Our boy thinks it would be best if he went to investigate and tell Daroka to just wait outside for some reason. Daroka wants to go with him, but he gets pretty upset and tells her to stop acting without permission so he can check out all the plot development. He reminds her that he will leave her if she gets too annoying and tells her to scream if she needs him. Daroka patiently waits outside but is terrified when she sees that a whole bunch of these sad Madoa bots are piled up like trash. Adonis investigates the building using some light and we find that Daroka is really bad at listening since she followed him. She tries to tell herself that she has a good reason for disobeying him and explains that she promised Mr. Punch that she would keep Adonis out of trouble. She lies to herself as she thinks that Adonis wouldn't actually leave her in a place like this, but she quickly remembers that her boy just left her with a bunch of strangers. She convinces herself that Adonis wouldn't actually hurt her, but then remembers that he almost choked her to death. Just then that Adonis finds her and of course, gets really upset. She doesn't seem to take him seriously and he even begins to think that she is irritating him on purpose. Daroka gives him a whole speech and how they should be staying together, it would be safer, and she has the bag with all their supplies. Surprisingly, Adonis agrees and just tells her to not get in his way. They continue investigating and approach a room that smells terrible and has a sound coming out of it that would get me banned on YouTube. For some strange reason that I will never be able to understand, they decide to go into the room. Inside they find that these crazy robots have developed plot with someone until they died. The robots say that they just want to be loved and Adonis realizes that they have somehow developed a sense of self. They just can't stop developing plot with this corpse and they can't understand why they were created. Adonis has no answer for why they were created, but he does know why they need to be destroyed. He destroys them all and one of the robots sadly thanks him for putting an end to their sad existence. Somewhere in the desert, two members of a special espionage unit quickly approach a checkpoint. These Kunoichi girls are annoyed by the Redia's soldiers and decide to discharge right through them. They go by numbers, so 5 tells 6 to get ready, 5 instantly takes out most of the soldiers, and 6 does the cleanup work finishing off the last guy. Some other stupid soldiers think they're catching these girls off guard, but they instead just end up as more corpses on the ground. These girls look at their handiwork and call the Redia's soldiers pitiful. Adonis recalls how the witch overlord Ophelia once said that science reveals humankind's true nature. In a world where any toy can be created, it was only inevitable that some dude would invent plot-developing robots. They find the same shackles that Daroka once wore at the Redian concentration camp, and Adonis reveals that this nation offered their own women in exchange for these robots. Adonis apparently learned how to be a mechanic at some point, as he works on a vehicle and explains that this city of Mamuda likely traded away all their women, all their daughters and wives exchanged for robots, so this just gives our revenge-filled protagonist more reasons to hate humans. Of course this led to the nation's downfall since without women, the next generation cannot be born. This definitely isn't the only nation that has fallen in this way, and it makes him sick. The two take some parts that Adonis took from the cars, and head to the pile of robots. The genius mechanical engineer explains that he's making an improvised EMP, but the clueless Daroka has no clue what that is. Adonis put it simply for her and explains that he is putting the pile of robots to rest. Daroka is concerned about the lifeless robots being hurt, but Adonis explains that they will only feel a small shock. He uses his written-style summoning magic and has Daroka hold the speaker. Waves of the EMP cover the robots, and Daroka sees one of them thanking them. The dirty deed is done and Daroka is glad that Adonis is there with her. Up above, we see that the two dangerous Kunoichi girls were watching them, and they realize that this guy is the man that is most wanted by the Redia Empire. He is the infamous witch's apprentice, but these chicks can't believe that he's just a teenager. 6 tells 5 not to underestimate this boy though, as he has given the Redia Empire considerable trouble. He slaughtered an unthinkable number of citizens and even annihilated the elite force that was sent after him. These two girls technically aren't allowed to deal with anything involving witches apparently. However, 6 points out that some emperor named Suzhur instructed them to capture anything that might help keep Redia in check. They hope that they will be rewarded if they succeed in their mission and wonder if they could even live in the capital. 6 seems to have some kind of deep affection for the other number girl and explains that she will live anywhere as long as they are together. With that, they decide that it's time to confront the witch's apprentice. Number 6 and chucks number 5 to take Adonis while she eliminates the girl, but 5 reminds her that she is the older one and is in charge. However, we see that Shirasagi has been watching them like a creep and smiles like one too. Adonis and Daroka finish up saving the world from the plot developing robot takeover and prepare to leave. The number sisters who are going after them, however, are confronted by Shirasagi. They demand to know who he is, but the creep has no answer for them. To these girls, no answer means hostility, so they instantly attack. Back in Plot Town, we see that Daroka has made a grave for the Madoa, and tells them to rest in peace in robot heaven. Our boy Adonis isn't delusional like her though, and explains that offering condolences to them won't do any good. Creating graves and praying is simply a way for the living to cope, but doesn't do anything beyond that. Adonis jumps on this opportunity and explains that if she really wants to honor the Madoa, then she needs to do what he loves doing most. That is to get revenge on the entire human race with the mass extinction. That's just a little too extreme for her though, so they just agree to disagree. Daroka then prays to a tombstone that she made for the witches, so Adonis thinks this would be a good place for her to just stay forever. She enjoys crying so much, and there are tons of things to cry about in this city. Daroka somehow still can't believe he would say something so rude, but Adonis is never one to hold back for any reason. He reminds her that all her friends' lives were ended because he brought the humans to the moon base. She shouldn't even want to travel with him, and this is her last chance to reconsider. This very serious and tense moment is interrupted when Daroka obviously doesn't care. She shows him that she found the 2 little dolls that Adonis rejected and he thought he got rid of those. Daroka explains that she simply doesn't want to blame him and doesn't want to argue anymore. She acknowledges that the witches were trying to use him. Their obsession with creating magical items to use against the humans led them to abducting Adonis. They tried to provoke him into reviving Chloe, so she realizes that this was practically betrayal against him. Adonis decides it is time for them to leave, and he shows that Daroka is continuing to change him little by little as he apologizes. He demands that she get rid of those stupid little dolls, but she's pretty proud of their miniature selves. Adonis wishes she was more skilled at something else, and she reveals that she can sing. Adonis isn't much of a fan of her singing and just asked her not to do it while traveling. They are instantly shocked. However, as Shirasagi appears before them for the first time, he wants them to stop flirting so much as it's making him jealous. Adonis can instantly tell that he is an enemy, and can't believe that they have already found them so quickly. Adonis prepares for a fight, but Shirasagi shows just how dangerous he is as he absolutely destroys their motorcycle, and we see that he eliminated the number sisters. Shirasagi introduces himself as someone that has a pretty big deal in Redia, and reveals that he is there for their heads. Of course, Adonis doesn't have a single fearful bone in his body, and he is just glad that he finally found someone from Redia that he can kill. Story continues. We see that the intelligence agency was responsible for tracking down Adonis. Agency Chief Charmy welcomes Adonis back to the planet's surface, but explains that he underestimated humanity. They were able to find him because the coordinates of his unauthorized transfer were on their server. We then get a look at this crack team of intelligence agents as they call out several thieves and criminals all across the nation. Charmy doesn't want to have to work overtime, so she tells Shirasagi to make it quick. Adonis realizes that he made a huge mistake as he didn't think they would be able to find them so quickly. Of course he is curious about the 2 heads Shirasagi was carrying with them, but he doesn't even know who they were. All he knows is that the two girls got there before him, and he apparently wasn't the only one coming after Adonis. They were simply in his way, so he eliminated them. Daroka demands that he stop disrespecting them, but Shirasagi has no clue who she is either. Shirasagi doesn't like the way she is talking to him, so he threatens her. Adonis sort of comes to her rescue by pulling her hair and tossing her aside. He prepares to use his written style summoning magic, but Shirasagi instantly stops him. Adonis is very quick however and quickly pulls out his gun. Firing a couple shots proves to be useless as Shirasagi easily dodges them. Adonis keeps firing away but is completely unable to hit Shirasagi because of Shirasagi's insane reaction speed. Adonis determines that Shirasagi must be a cyborg. Our boy uses his magic in a pretty creative way as he fires a bullet and uses his gain spell to make it grow. Charmy can instantly tell how dangerous the attack is and warns Shirasagi not to try to stop it. Shirasagi couldn't be more calm as he tells her not to worry and he dodges it like Neo from the Matrix. This psycho goes to attack Adonis, so Daroka uses her love spell on him and Shirasagi stops. She threatens to stop his movements completely if he doesn't surrender, so the guy just stands there. Adonis wants to use this opportunity to get some information, so he instructs Daroka to ask him a whole bunch of questions about his abilities. Unfortunately, she doesn't get the chance to ask anything as this lunatic just starts laughing. He is delighted to see that Daroka used a love spell and says that it's no wonder she looks just like a certain person. Daroka has no clue what he's talking about and he reveals that it's the queen. A look back shows our glorious mustache-having emperor and forces us to relive the terrible moment when he took his own life because of the queen's love spell. Our pair has no clue how Shirasagi was able to move and this cycle rips off his shirt. This reveals that she already had a heart on his chest, meaning that he must already be under someone else's love spell. Shirasagi reveals that he has a ton of holes in his back and uses his ability called Hummingbird Release. This attack launches a whole bunch of robotic hands out of his body, and Adonis thinks that the gear expansion has gone out of control. Adonis tells Daroka to get out of the way. Her love spell doesn't work on this guy, so she is completely useless. Adonis then has a memory of when his beloved Chloe was being tormented. Emperor Gerda told her that if she couldn't use magic then she is just a useless woman, but Adonis doesn't want to be anything like him. Daroka's crazy self still wants to be useful, so she lifts up her rock as if she could ever do anything with it. She actually just doesn't want anyone else to lose their life. Daroka doesn't know if seeking revenge is wrong, but she has already made her choice, and that is to stand by Adonis to the very end. She clearly won't be able to do anything with the rock, but that's okay because Adonis has already prepared something. Daroka puts the rock down and Adonis summons a rapier sword for her. Adonis summons some pretty cool looking armor for himself and the two strike a pose. Adonis activates the sword and explains that the indestructible magical blade can now pierce steel. She will be able to destroy most things just by swinging it around, but he recommends that she learn some basic sword skills. Our boy is as useful as ever as he summons an instruction manual that even a dumb witch like her can understand. Shirasagi demands once again that they stop flirting so much and has all his robot hands attack. Our duo was surrounded, so they have no choice but to try to destroy each hand one by one. Individually their hands are weak, so Adonis is confident that they can handle the situation. Unfortunately, there seems to be an endless wave of hands constantly attacking and they become overwhelming. Adonis has to come to Daroka's rescue and realizes that there are just too many of these hands. Shirasagi then shocks them as he reveals that the hands are actually powerful as well. He sends a bunch of them into the sky and removes the limiter on the hands to increase their damage output. The powered-up hands rain down from the sky, so Adonis uses a spell called Graveneer. This attack sends out several energy ribbon things and destroys several hands. The ribbons do a good job for now, but Adonis wants to end the fight. He tells Daroka to get close to him and encases them with the energy to form a spell variant that he calls the Cannonball. Shirasagi was impressed by this giant ball of energy, but Charmy is terrified of it and warns Shirasagi not to let it touch him. Shirasagi fears nothing and uses his ability called Hummingbird Castle. All the hands return to his body and he uses them like thrusters. Shirasagi uses their maximum output and manages to stop Adonis's giant ball in its tracks. Shirasagi gets pushed back quite a bit, but he's extremely satisfied when the ball completely stops. Unfortunately for him, this was all part of Adonis's plan as he prepared an attack. Shirasagi manages to push him back just in time and tells the dentist that he underestimated him. Adonis reveals that he was the one actually being underestimated, and Daroka surprisingly appears from behind him. Adonis tells her to show the humans the witch's vengeance, so Daroka punches her sword into both of Shirasagi's legs. Adonis is pleased, but Shirasagi doesn't seem hurt at all. He tells Daroka that she should have aimed for his head or even better his heart, so Adonis rushes to save her. Things get pretty bad for them though as Shirasagi sends them both flying with a powerful punch. Daroka is in really bad shape from just that one punch and Shirasagi tells her that she ruins her surprise attack. He credits them for being perfectly coordinated but states that it just wasn't enough. Unfortunately for this idiot, he underestimated them again as he is captured by the energy ribbons from earlier. Adonis tells this guy not to bother begging for his life since he has never been the type to show mercy. Adonis begins to strangle him to death, but the fight isn't over as Shirasagi grabs Adonis with some hands he had hiding. The hands pin Adonis against the wall, which is terrible since he doesn't keep writing, then his spell will vanish. Adonis demands that he let him go, but Shirasagi tells him to let him go first. Daroka realizes how things are falling apart and reminds herself that she decided that she wouldn't let Adonis die. She tells herself to stop hesitating and prepares to finally do something useful. Shirasagi was preparing something however, so Adonis tells her to watch her back and duck. Unfortunately, Daroka has the slowest reaction time in the entire universe and one of Shirasagi's hands grabs onto her. Daroka is taking sky high and Adonis hates how she always has to be saved. This motivates our boy to push harder, but Shirasagi reveals that he had more hands waiting as he pins Adonis to the ground. Adonis's pen is completely out of reach now, so Shirasagi was able to easily break free from the energy ribbons. Things could not be any worse now, as Adonis is pinned and Daroka is being useless as always and Shirasagi was completely free. Adonis is then horrified when he realizes what Shirasagi's planning to do. Shirasagi signals to his robot hands that he wants fingers to be shoved into Daroka's eyes. The hands prepared for the terrifying attack, so Adonis tried to tell him to stop. Daroka knows what's coming and with no way out, she thanks Adonis for everything. There will be no way for her to recover from such an attack, so she thanks Adonis once more for staying by her side this entire time. A flashback shows all the time they spent together throughout this entire journey. Daroka has only one wish now, and that is that they could have seen more sights together. Shirasagi couldn't care any less and tells her that this will be the last time she will ever see anything. Adonis struggles, but there is no hope of breaking free. Daroka looks at him one last time and Adonis really tries to call out to her, but she can't even hear anything at this point. Daroka can only cry now and the robots pierce right through her eyes. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.